Welcome to our Sci-Fi Story channel. We'd be thrilled if you subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to support us, allowing us to bring you more stories in this genre.
Lysara Velnek stood at the edge of the observation deck, her lavender skin glimmering under the sterile lights of the Krallen research vessel. Beyond the thick glass, the untamed planet of Vulturis loomed, a swirling mass of green jungles and jagged mountain peaks. This was the frontier, uncharted and hostile, teeming with life both wondrous and deadly. For a xenobiologist like Lysara, it was paradise. Suddenly, the ship's alarm screamed through the silence. The peaceful hum of machinery snapped into chaos. Her heart leapt as the vessel lurched violently, throwing her off balance. Clutching the wall, Lysara struggled to her feet, confusion giving way to cold dread. Rogues. The thought pierced her like a shard of ice. They had been warned about the bands of rogue aliens that stalked the outer rims, mercenaries and pirates, preying on anything they deemed valuable. But not this far out. Not in a research zone. The intercom crackled to life. All personnel to emergency pods. This is not a drill. Repeat, nada. The transmission cut off, replaced by the deafening roar of explosions tearing through the hull. Lysara bolted from the deck, heart pounding in her ears. Crew members rushed past her, their faces etched with panic. The floor trembled beneath her feet as another blast rocked the ship. Panels above sparked, raining down shards of light and fire. She barely dodged the debris, adrenaline coursing through her veins. In the chaos, she reached the emergency pods, but not before a violent explosion ripped through the corridor behind her, flinging her forward. Her vision blurred as she scrambled into the closest pod. The hatch sealed shut with a hiss, encasing her in a suffocating silence. For a moment, everything was still. Then, the pod's thrusters kicked in, and Lysara felt herself being pulled away from the dying ship, her body weightless as it descended into the atmosphere of the alien world below. Through the tiny viewport, she watched in horror as the Krallen vessel, her sanctuary, her home, was consumed by fire. The rogue ships circled it like vultures, finishing what they had started. Her escape pod rattled violently as it pierced Vulturis' atmosphere, plummeting toward the unforgiving surface. Warning lights flashed, and the control panel buzzed with malfunction alarms. Panic clawed at her mind, but she fought to stay calm. She was trained for this: adapt, survive, but nothing had prepared her for the crushing realization that she was utterly alone. The pod crashed through the thick jungle canopy, slamming into the ground with a force that knocked the breath from her lungs. For a moment, she lay there, stunned, the metallic taste of blood on her tongue. When she finally unstrapped herself and stumbled out into the dense undergrowth, the weight of her isolation settled in. The towering trees loomed above, their dark branches twisting like the limbs of some ancient beast. Strange sounds echoed from all directions, the guttural growls of unseen predators. The air was thick, suffocating, alive with menace. Lysara's heart raced. There was no ship, no crew, and no rescue. She was alone. Alone, and surrounded by monsters, Lysara moved through the thick, tangled jungle with the cautious precision of a hunted animal. Her breathing was shallow, her senses sharp. Every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves set her on edge. She could feel the jungle watching her, eyes she couldn't see, predators she couldn't identify, waiting for her to falter. The rustling in the bushes stopped her in her tracks. Lysara's fingers tightened around the small plasma cutter strapped to her waist. She held her breath, trying to slow her racing heart. There was movement again, closer this time. Something was circling her. Before she could react, a massive creature burst from the underbrush, 8-legged, fanged, and covered in thick, armored scales. It let out a guttural hiss, eyes locking on her like prey. Lysara's survival instincts kicked in. She darted behind a large tree as the creature lunged, its claws tearing through the ground where she had stood moments ago. She pulled out her plasma cutter, but the beast was already upon her, swiping at her with terrifying speed. Her foot caught on a vine, sending her sprawling backward. The creature's fangs glistened in the pale light as it loomed over her, ready to strike. Lysara fired her plasma cutter in a blind panic. The shot went wide, sizzling into the trees. This was it. She wasn't going to survive this. Suddenly, a deafening bang echoed through the jungle, followed by a sharp, sizzling sound. The creature recoiled, howling in pain. Another shot rang out, this time hitting the beast square in the head. It collapsed with a final, shuddering breath, its body steaming from the impact. Lysara scrambled to her feet, eyes darting toward the direction of the shots. Emerging from the thick jungle was a figure, tall, armored, and unmistakably human. His gun, still smoking, was pointed at the dead creature, but his attention quickly shifted to Lysara. "Didn't think anyone else survived the crash," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. Lysara stared at him in shock, her mind racing. She knew what he was, human. The very species her people had warned her about. Dangerous, unpredictable, enemies of the Krallen. She backed away instinctively, keeping her plasma cutter raised. "Stay back," she hissed. "I don't need your help." The man raised his hands in a placating gesture, though his expression remained impassive. "Suit yourself. But judging by the way that thing almost ripped you apart, you might want to reconsider." Lysara's pulse pounded in her ears, every instinct screaming to run. Yet something about him gave her pause. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't threatening. And he had saved her life. She glanced at the creature's motionless body, then back at the human. "I didn't ask for your help," she muttered, lowering the plasma cutter slightly. "You didn't have to," he said, holstering his weapon. "Name's Commander Alex Jansen. We don't have to be friends, but I suggest we don't die out here." Lysara narrowed her eyes. Trusting him was the last thing she wanted to do, but the jungle was filled with more of those monsters, and she was stranded, alone. Reluctantly, she nodded. The jungle seemed to close in tighter around Lysara as she followed Commander Alex Jansen through the underbrush, her every step cautious, every movement tense. She kept her plasma cutter within easy reach, watching his every move, ready for the slightest hint of betrayal. The dense canopy overhead filtered the sunlight into strange, dim patches, casting long, shifting shadows across the forest floor. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the occasional distant roar of unseen creatures. She had never been this close to a human before. Her people had told her stories, warnings, really, about how dangerous they were. Ruthless, selfish, violent. And yet here she was, following one who had saved her life. Her mind swirled with questions, but suspicion still clung to every thought. "Where are we going?" Lysara finally asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Alex didn't look back. His focus fixed ahead as he navigated the winding path. "There's a camp a few clicks from here. It's safe, for now. It'll give us some cover while we figure out our next move." She frowned. "You expect me to trust you just like that?" Alex slowed his pace, turning to face her. His eyes were hard, but there was no malice in them. "Trust? No. I expect you to want to survive. That's it." He gestured around them. "Look, out here, it's not about who you like or who you don't. It's about staying alive. And you, alien or not, need help." Lysara bristled at his bluntness but knew he wasn't wrong. The planet was merciless, and though she had trained for survival, this terrain was unlike anything she had studied. The creatures here were far more dangerous than she had anticipated. Still, the idea of relying on a human grated against everything she believed. As they moved deeper into the jungle, she couldn't help but study him. Alex was methodical, scanning the surroundings constantly, his hand never far from his weapon. Despite the tension between them, she could see he was disciplined. A soldier, perhaps. Someone who had been through more than his fair share of battles. "I don't understand," Lysara said after a long stretch of silence. "Why help me? You could have left me to that thing back there. It would have been easier." Alex's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. "You're not the first to ask that. He ducked under a low-hanging branch, then added, "Let's just say I've seen enough people die for one lifetime. If I can stop it, I do. Even if you're different." "Different?" Lysara echoed, her voice laced with a trace of bitterness. "You mean, alien?" He shrugged. "Yeah, sure. Alien. But here, that doesn't matter. Out here, we're just two people trying not to get eaten." Lysara didn't respond, though his words echoed in her mind. Just two people. She'd never considered humans in that light, just people. Her people had painted them as savages, uncaring and cruel. But this man didn't fit that description. He was something else. As they neared a steep ridge, Alex paused and turned back to her. "We're almost there. Once we're in the camp, we'll regroup and come up with a plan. Sound good?" Lysara hesitated, then nodded. She hated to admit it, but she needed him. For now, they climbed the ridge, and as they reached the top, the faint outline of Alex's camp came into view, nestled in a small clearing. It wasn't much, a makeshift shelter, a fire pit, and a few supply crates, but it was a start. As they descended into the camp, Lysara couldn't shake the feeling that this uneasy alliance was far from over. Whatever awaited them on this hostile world, one thing was clear: she couldn't survive it alone. The camp was eerily quiet. Lysara had expected more people, more noise, something other than the faint crackling of a dying fire and the muted hum of a portable generator. But the clearing was deserted, save for Alex and the shadow of danger that seemed to hang over everything. "This is it?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism as she surveyed the makeshift shelter and worn crates. "Not much, but it's kept me alive for 2 days," Alex replied, setting down his pack and grabbing a small device from one of the crates. He fiddled with it, and soon a low-frequency hum filled the air. "Portable shield generator. Should keep the local wildlife out, as long as we don't provoke anything too big." Lysara eyed the tree line suspiciously. The jungle felt alive, teeming with unseen predators that watched from the shadows. She could feel their presence, a primal awareness that sent a shiver down her spine. Something was out there, and it was close. She couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. "Something's wrong," she muttered, stepping closer to Alex, who was busy unpacking rations. Alex paused, glancing at her with a raised brow. "What do you mean?" "I can feel it," Lysara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're not alone." He froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. In the stillness, they both listened. The jungle, which had been a cacophony of distant growls and insect chirps, was now disturbingly silent. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled through the air, deep and guttural. Lysara's breath caught in her throat. From the shadows, a pair of glowing, yellow eyes emerged, watching them with cold, calculating malice. It was bigger than the creature they had faced earlier, much bigger. Its sleek, black fur blended seamlessly with the darkness, and its powerful, muscular frame moved with terrifying grace. "Get inside," Alex hissed, motioning toward the shelter. His voice was calm, but Lysara saw the tension in his posture. He was scared, too. The creature circled them, its predatory gaze fixed on Lysara. She could feel its hunger, its intent. It wanted her. Without hesitation, Alex drew his weapon and fired a warning shot, the blaster's light slicing through the air. The beast flinched, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it crouched low, ready to strike. "Inside. Now." Alex barked. Lysara sprinted toward the shelter, her heart pounding in her chest. She dove inside just as the creature lunged. Alex rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding the beast's massive claws. He fired again, but the shot only grazed the creature's flank. The shield generator crackled to life as Lysara activated it from inside the shelter. The creature slammed into the invisible barrier, snarling in frustration as it was repelled. Panting, Alex scrambled to his feet, keeping his weapon trained on the creature. It paced around the perimeter, eyes locked on Lysara through the thin shelter walls, its growls vibrating through the air like a death knell. it's not going to leave, Lasara whispered, staring at the beast in horrified fascination. She had never seen anything like it, a perfect predator, relentless. Unstoppable, I know, Alex said grimly. It's been tracking me since I crashed. Lasara's eyes widened. You knew it was out there. I hoped it had lost the scent, he admitted, voice tight with exhaustion. Guess I was wrong. They were trapped, surrounded by jungle, with a monster waiting to tear them apart the moment they let their guard down. What's the plan, Commander? Lasara asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Alex's jaw tightened. We don't wait for it to strike. We kill it. Lasara swallowed hard, staring into the glowing eyes of the hunter. They were running out of time. The creature's low, menacing growls reverberated through the thin walls of the shelter, each snarl a reminder of the danger lurking just beyond the shield. Lasara's pulse quickened, but she forced herself to stay calm, to think. Alex was pacing, his eyes constantly shifting between the beast outside and the equipment scattered around the camp. We can't hold it off forever, Lasara said, her voice tense but controlled. That shield won't last long against something that strong. Alex nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Agreed. It's smart. It'll wait, test the shield, look for weaknesses. We don't have time to sit around. He crouched by one of the supply crates, rummaging through its contents. I've got a few explosives, but nothing heavy enough to kill that thing outright. Lasara's eyes flickered with understanding. But we can trap it. Alex looked up at her, intrigued. Go on. It's fast, but it's not invincible. It knows we're a threat. Your shots slowed it down, even if they didn't do much damage. We lure it in, force it to make a mistake, then hit it with everything we've got. The commander studied her for a moment, impressed. Not bad, alien. What are you thinking? Lasara knelt beside him, her mind racing as she pieced together a plan. The shield's an energy barrier. Right? The creature's been testing it, seeing how much force it can apply before breaking through. But it doesn't know where the shield's weakest point is. We can manipulate that. Alex's eyes lit up with understanding. We make it think the shield's failing in one spot, draw it in. And when it's close enough, we drop the shield and hit it hard, Lasara finished. I'll need to be bait. Like hell you will, Alex said immediately, his voice firm. I'll take the risk. Lasara shook her head. It's been tracking me since we landed. It wants me, not you. I'll lead it to the weak spot, but you have to be ready. There was a long pause as Alex stared at her, weighing the plan. Finally, he nodded. Fine. But the moment it gets too close, you fall back. No heroics. Lasara gave a curt nod, her heart hammering in her chest. The plan was dangerous, reckless even, but they didn't have a choice. It was either that, or they'd die here, torn apart by a monster from this unforgiving world. The two quickly set to work, positioning the explosives in strategic locations and adjusting the shield's frequency to create a subtle, deliberate weakness. All the while, the creature prowled just beyond the barrier, its glowing eyes never leaving them. When everything was in place, Lasara stood at the edge of the shield, her body tense as she prepared herself for the task ahead. The beast growled low in its throat, sensing her vulnerability. Are you ready? Alex asked, his voice steady but low. She took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. Ready. With a flick of the switch, the shield shimmered, creating the illusion of a weak point directly in front of her. The creature's eyes gleamed with predatory hunger, and it lunged forward, claws tearing at the ground as it charged toward her. Lasara's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment where it all could end. Now, Alex. She screamed, just as the beast reached the edge of the barrier. The shield flickered and died, and the monster surged forward, right into the trap. Time slowed as the beast lunged through the fading barrier, its massive claws outstretched, glistening in the dim light. Its glowing yellow eyes locked on Lasara, filled with raw, primal hunger. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she stood her ground, waiting for the perfect moment. Now, Alex. She shouted again, the words tearing from her throat. The creature was almost on her when, with a deafening roar, the explosives detonated. The blast ripped through the air, hurling dirt, rocks, and metal fragments in every direction. The shockwave hit the beast head-on, sending it crashing backward, its snarls turning into a furious howl of pain. Lasara threw herself to the ground just as the explosion went off, the force of it shaking the jungle around them. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, but she scrambled to her feet, looking for the creature through the smoke. Alex emerged from behind the shelter, his blaster already drawn, aimed at the writhing mass of fur and muscle. The beast had been wounded, one of its legs mangled from the explosion, but it wasn't dead. Not yet. Stay back, Alex warned, stepping toward the thrashing creature. He fired once, then again, each shot precise, aimed for its head. The blaster beams sizzled against its tough hide, burning through fur and flesh. The beast roared in agony, its movements slower, weaker, but still dangerous. Lasara grabbed a jagged piece of metal from the debris, her eyes narrowed with determination. This was their chance. They had to finish it now. The creature growled low, its breath ragged as it tried to stand. Its eyes were no longer filled with cold malice, but desperate rage. With a final, powerful burst of strength, it lunged again, its jaws snapping toward Alex. Lasara acted on instinct. She raced forward, adrenaline coursing through her veins, and plunged the sharp metal into the side of the creature's neck. Blood sprayed, hot and thick, coating her hands as the beast let out a deafening, guttural scream. It twisted wildly, but Lasara held her ground, driving the weapon deeper. With one last, violent shudder, the creature collapsed, its body twitching as life drained from its massive form. The jungle fell eerily silent once again, the only sound the crackling of small fires from the explosion. Panting, Lasara stumbled back, her chest heaving as she stared down at the fallen predator. Its once bright eyes were now dull, lifeless. It's over, she whispered, hardly believing the words. Alex lowered his weapon, his shoulders sagging in exhaustion. He glanced at Lasara, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. You did it. We did it, she corrected, wiping blood from her hands. Her heart was still racing, the adrenaline still surging through her veins. But they were alive. Against all odds, they had survived. As the smoke began to clear, they stood side by side, looking out at the dark jungle beyond. It was dangerous, unpredictable, but for the first time since their crash, they felt a glimmer of hope. Think we can make it off this rock? Lasara asked, a faint smile playing on her lips. Alex gave a weary nod, a grin breaking through his exhaustion. One step at a time, alien. But yeah, I think we've got a shot. And with that, they turned toward the remnants of the camp, ready to face whatever came next, together.